Reduce, Reuse, Reimagine. Sorting Out the Recycling System by Beth Porter. Narrated by Natalie Naudus. 1. The ecosystem of recycling. In the forest, dozens of complex systems operate in quiet determination. Organisms compete for resources throughout their ecosystems. Tiny acorns work tirelessly for years to grow and burst into the top level of a tree canopy, while mosses envelop woodland floors and regulate soil moisture. Within every forest exists a myriad of systems striving for their individual success, while also contributing to the longevity of the larger ecosystem. This allows a community of organisms to thrive. But ecosystems are not simply harmonious utopias. There is fierce, brutal competition and fatal tragedies. What allows these turbulent ecosystems to maintain their existence is not the absence of conflict, but the balanced use and replenishment of resources over time. When a resource is divisible, such as a tree used by many insects and animals for shelter and food, multiple species have access to its benefits. Organisms vying with each other can coexist by using the resource at different times and in varying amounts. This is what prevents a catastrophic race to the bottom, meaning the depletion of resources. Conversely, a non-divisible resource generally ends up under the control of a singular, dominant species. Species using the same limited resource in the same way at the same time cannot coexist for long. But when different aspects of a resource are used in a variety of ways to serve multiple stakeholders, equilibrium can be achieved. Ecosystems require balance to survive, and when that balance is compromised, as in the extinction of a resource or a species, disaster can strike the system as a whole. This vital management of resources can also be reflected in economic systems. A healthy ecosystem, like a healthy economic system, does not have a void of competition or effort. Instead, there are competing forces that sometimes work cooperatively to keep the larger system afloat. This single planet has finite resources. It is our responsibility as organisms of a shared global ecosystem to use them efficiently, equitably, and sustainably. In both nature and economics, we observe when a healthy distribution of resources is achieved, systems can not only function, but flourish. The United States recycling system has removed a ton of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, actually in the hundreds of millions of tons, and has the potential to remove much more. A functional recycling system can boost our economy by providing manufacturers with the means to generate new products and benefits the environment by reducing the demand to extract raw materials. However, this potential has yet to be fully seen. Unlike the layers of systems operating in a thriving and healthy forest, our recycling system experiences bottlenecking and inefficiency. How can the United States, one of the leading nations on innovation and technology, lag behind in the most obvious of resource recovery systems? Where in our history of recycling did we go from a leader to a laggard, and we can't seem to exceed a 34% recycling rate, while other nations have rates double that? Our recycling process has many examples of dysfunction. However, it is still ripe with all the potential of an acorn when given water and healthy soil. What we need are policies to incentivize a large systemic change. We need to make materials that can be effectively recycled, and we need standardized recycling rules so that individuals can easily understand the process. Nature knows how to recycle itself, decomposing waste back into the soil to continue the circle of growth. We should follow its lead. Systems touch every part of our lives. Whether it's the traffic route a bus follows or the process of waiting in line for tickets to a show, systems help us navigate the world and can bring ease and comfort into our lives. The beauty of a working system is similar to a tall oak tree, with much of the mechanics going on underneath the surface, so much so that we may enjoy the results of all these grand designs without mulling over the minutiae of its operations. We might take for granted a working oven as it systematically cooks our dinner. We also might take for granted the shade of the tree in our backyard. But when the oven is broken or a huge tree limb falls onto the roof, we notice right away. A system is most noticed when it's not working. In the case of the U.S. recycling system, the dysfunction is seen through the decreased value of recyclables from contamination or delays in processing residential materials, or when neighborhood residents suspect their carefully placed recyclables are just dumped into the garbage truck. If one aspect of the system doesn't operate correctly or is trying to function without another key participant, the system staggers and can even break down. When delving into the complex and multifaceted world of recycling, it is helpful to view this industrial web through a systems thinking lens. Systems thinking is a term attributed to Barry Richmond, who defined it as the art and science of making reliable inferences about behavior by developing an increasingly deep understanding of underlying structure. In short, Richmond says systems thinking allows us to view the forest and the trees with one eye on each. Since Richmond developed this concept in 1987, there have been many adaptations of his original definition, but the common threads woven throughout all these interpretations are the interconnectedness of systems, the understanding of dynamic behavior, and the need to see a system as a whole rather than as its parts. Richmond affirmed that it is essential to take a systems view of a problem. We should seek to understand all parts of a web rather than solely elicit the perspective of one expert on one corner of it. He noted that only when this full system scope has been achieved can we be expected to act responsibly. A system is a regularly interacting group of items forming a unified whole. This can be seen in the forest, as photosynthesis and decomposition chug along, accomplishing their respective tasks but also feeding into one another. In order to look at a process within a systems thinking lens, one must consider these three parts: the system's elements, the interconnections, and the purpose. Let's make a simplified description of a forest ecosystem through these parts. The forest's purpose is to be a habitat for organisms and to process carbon while creating oxygen to maintain a healthy atmosphere. A few of the system elements would be the trees and animals, and the interconnections are seen in how they all rely on each other to survive. For example, many tree seedlings are dispersed by animals, and the trees will in turn grow to provide shelter and food for animals. The purpose of recycling is both to lessen our society's negative impact on the environment, as well as to provide manufacturers with quality materials to generate new products that will bolster our economy. Residents, municipalities, waste management companies, transfer stations, sorting facilities, material brokers, manufacturers, and customers are among the many elements of a recycling system. Each of these elements, or stakeholders, has a vested interest and involvement in the production of recycled materials. Whether each stakeholder embraces that role and responsibility determines if the system will thrive or decline. The interconnections, or interrelationships, are what exist between each of the elements. These connections can be found in everyday moments, like when a neighborhood resident looks up recycling rules from their city's website, or when a company's new policy mandates buying more recycled materials from manufacturers. This is the time when different stakeholders or elements overlap and interact with one another, like when the municipality educates its residents and the manufacturer sends prices to the company. Interconnections are also present when one element of the recycling system tries to shift its own agenda onto another area without fully taking into account the ramifications of that move. For example, When a city decides to have residents put all recyclables in the same bin to reduce its budget and boost participation, it might